prime thing is you have to win.
There you go. There you go. That's what I'm talking about. Hey, Mark, settle down a little bit.
All right, welcome back to the Just Win podcast. I'm Ted Nguyen. That's Tashan Reed, and that guy over there is an old familiar face. I don't know if you guys remember him, but that's Vic Tafur, who covers the 49ers now. And we are all in Vegas for joint practices, which is why I am recording at the Cosmopolitan conference room because my internet is terrible in my room. But we got to do what we got to do. But that's Vic Tafur. Vic, what's up, man? How have you liked reporting, for the Niners, and what are the big differences between covering these two teams?
I'm doing good. It was fun to be back today at the old stomping ground, see some old faces, shake some hands, kiss some babies. Big turnout. I'm surprised a lot of our fans here there were in past years, but it was kind of a cool atmosphere. The new beat's cool. I'm kind of getting my feet wet, learning the roster, learning from the players, but yeah, covering football is current football. I think, yeah, it's good. I'm happy to be back in the Bay.
Yeah, have you noticed a big difference with the Raiders and Niners? I mean, this is a team that's coming off a Super Bowl appearance and multiple conference championships and things like that.
The biggest thing I've noticed is like with the Niners, there's probably like 6 or 7 like really strong veteran leaders on the team. Like there's a clear, higher echelon of guys who not only are great players but also kind of like really are follow me, kind of guys who young players can kind of build off of, and they watch them and they listen to them. And every practice is definitely run at a pretty high level. There's like expectations where I think the Raiders in the past have not had that level, that number of guys who really kind of raised the bar. I think that's been a big thing I've noticed as far as like, Niners had a bunch of injuries this preseason in camp, and there's still question marks about their depth, but they're pretty confident because they know that these guys are healthy, like, McCaffrey, Purdy, Kittle, Warner, Lenore. They got some guys who really are top guys who are kind of giving them a lot of confidence so they can get it done again.
Yeah, man. Vic Tafur said the Raiders don't have any leaders, man. Got to clip that. I can go viral.
I said they only have 6 or 7 leaders. That's what I said. Not a large group. I don't want Max yelling at me, but obviously Max has been the example here for the last couple of years. But I think we've tried to bring guys in the past. It hasn't worked out. Like Chandler Jones and Christian Wilkins. There's a lot of Gardner. There's a lot Jimmy G. A lot of guys they thought were going to be those guys. It hasn't worked out, so they're trying again. Well, Geno now's a great time for Geno to kind of be that guy. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. So speaking of those guys, the Niners did not have a lot of their main guys practice. We thought that this was going to be a very pivotal, very physical practice for the Raiders, something they needed after kind of just playing a very bad game in Seattle where they missed a bunch of tackles and they got kind of ran over by a Seattle team that was just more physical than them. But the Niners are a very beat up team, like you said. Right now, they have a lot of injuries. It seemed like they made a decision to sit some of their players. Nick Bosa didn't practice, but still, I mean, they still got some good reps in today. What are you got? Some of your takeaways from today's practice? Let's start with the Raiders' offense against the Niners' defense.
Okay. I was gonna say as far as like you mentioned, like the injuries they've had, like they only had 3 guys who were healthy, 3 defensive starters who were able to practice today, so that's a big deal. And as far as Trent Williams, everyone was excited about Trent Williams going against Maxx Crosby. That's been the big headliner we thought. But like Shanahan mentioned, Trent Williams is 37 years old, and they know Trent Williams is a great player. He's healthy. Why would you throw him into a joint practice when guys are going to take their best shots at him? And it doesn't seem to make sense. I thought it was a smart approach. So going back to the Niners defense, of the guys who are out there, we mentioned, I think the 3 guys were Warner, Lenore, and D. Winters were the 3 starters who practiced. And they all were really good today. I mean, Fred Warner had a big hit on Dante Thornton. I think
Bryce Huff is the starter, right?
No, I mean, ideally, he'd be, because they got Bosa and Michael Williams will be the guy who's starting the edge. Huff will become a third down guy, I think, who comes in and move Michael inside. But yeah, I mean, so kind of, I guess, asterisks. But I thought Warner had a big hit on Dante Thornton, which I thought was kind of funny because the rookie definitely was not prepared for it. It was kind of like a medium intensity, medium speed practice. I think it was a pretty good hit where he kind of like was a little shocked by it. And Warner definitely loved that kind of stuff.
I got a welcome to NFL moment for him.
Yeah, I mean, he also had a nice pass breakup on Brock Bowers. Definitely was fired up for going against Brock. I thought I thought, the Raiders receivers, they had some drops, a lot of drops I saw. I thought it was funny because the one guy, I didn't know who he was, number 80, the tight end, is it Ian Thomas? The first half hour, I was like, who the hell is that guy? That guy's really good. And then I was just like, drop, drop, drop. Like, no, never mind. My bad, my bad. So he made an impression early on, but he had a rough second half to practice.
Yeah, I mean the Raiders receivers, like from what I could see anyway, it seemed like they weren't separating all that much either. Outside of Jacoby Myers, I think Jacoby Myers is pretty good. And he had a drop or two uncharacteristically, but he was probably the one guy that was getting open pretty often, and he had a touchdown in the red zone. But it was tough sledding for the other guys. I don't know if the 49ers are always that aggressive with the press man coverage, but it seemed like they were jamming them up at the line of scrimmage, and the guys kind of struggled to get off the ball a little bit.
Yeah, they're a feisty bunch. And Robert Sala definitely has brought that back with him. He's back now. He wants them to be aggressive, and they've been aggressive in practice in the preseason games. They're kind of like they've also, had injuries, but the guys who have stepped in have also been aggressive. Like rookie Marcus Siegel definitely come in and guys helmet in there. So that's kind of the mentality they have, which I think is kind of cool to see for a young secondary.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a different philosophy for Salah. He definitely, from what I've seen, he wants to press more and blitz more and just be a little bit more aggressive, which makes a lot of sense. I mean, it looks like they found themselves a bunch of feisty DBs, and that defensive line is not what it used to be. So getting a little bit more aggressive in that manner makes sense. And for the Raiders, which is why they put an emphasis on going deep today, because if you're going to play aggressive press coverage, you're going to have to beat these guys deep. And the Raiders started off slow, like you mentioned. There were a bunch of drops. That the day started off with a big Thornton drop, which on a deep post that could have been a huge play. He dropped that. Trey Tucker had a couple bad drops. One drop, he was like nobody near him on a crosser. Brock Bowers had a drop in the end zone too. But then after the red zone, during the red zone periods when they really started to get in sync and started to get going. Ashton Genty had a nice route and catch in the red zone. So it's kind of nature of the business when you're going against press coverage. It's going to be some inconsistent plays, but you're hoping to hit those big plays. And later on in the practice, the Raiders were definitely able to connect. I think the highlight of the day was Trey Tucker beating Lenore, who is one of the best corners in the league, on a deep pass for a touchdown.
I said this, I was impressed with the O-line. I thought the O-line going to Sean and I had drinks yesterday. I was telling him that from afar, it looked like they kind of screwed up. They really upgraded the O-line. Like they got Genty in the draft. They're going to run the ball a lot. I thought the O-line probably should have been addressed in the offseason. I thought I went in today with a low bar, but I thought they looked pretty good. I thought Colt Miller had a really nice practice. I thought Dylan Parham looked good. I liked the Jordan Meredith thing with JPJ at guard. I think and Meredith was probably a better center than he was a guard. So I think that unit could actually surprise people. I'm not saying they're great. I'm not saying they're good and very good, but I thought they were bad. And today I'm like, oh, maybe they might work. So I thought they bought time for you mentioned some of the deep plays today. I thought they actually had a good practice.
Yeah, I thought they were pretty solid in pass protection today. Like, I think that they were okay in pass protection against the Seahawks too. Obviously there's kind of an asterisk there given Bosa and Williams didn't practice. Like they weren't exactly going against the 49ers, best guys up front. Question is more so run blocking, which is pretty hard to evaluate that in practice. Like early on in the first 11 drill, they had a nice lane they opened up for Ashton Genty. Probably would have been like, I don't know, 20, 25-yard gain towards the left side of the offensive line, but they didn't really run much, later on in practice. So like we didn't, it's kind of hard to evaluate that standpoint of it. But I agree with you. I do think like from a pass protection in that area, they seem to hold up pretty well.
Yeah, and there's some controversy with Jackson Powers Johnson. I think within the fan base, it's a little bit more, um, I think, just fan created. Like to me, he's going to start. He's one of the best five, and I thought he had a pretty good day today. There was one block he took Alfred Collins like 10 yards down the field. But yeah, like we mentioned, the Niners defensive line was pretty beat up. I mean, even CJ West, one of the rookies they're going to count on, had to leave practice with injury. I think I saw you tweeted that it was a hyperextended knee.
Yeah, probably he's out for a week or so, but definitely another guy they lost. And Michael Williams, their first round pick, is out with the same injury. So definitely kind of short staffed, on the front line.
Yeah, and it's a good sign the Raiders did what they were supposed to do against a beat up Niners defensive line, and we'll see if they could kind of build on that. All right, let's talk about the Raiders
I
defense
guess we should
again.
probably we hit on like Geno a little bit. I mean, I think he, um, like he didn't have too many, like big plays, I guess. But I think that was more on receivers than him today.
Yeah.
I thought he threw some pretty nice passes out there. The guys just dropped, and at least from what I saw, I don't think he had any interceptions from the plays that I
I think
saw
there was
throughout
one that was
practice.
tipped, but that wasn't really his fault. I think it was a tipped
Okay,
play, but he's pretty clean.
yeah, and he
Obviously, he's a
was
huge upgrade on Gardner Minshew.
and AOC can't leave out Ted's manners, but no, he picked it up a lot in the red zone. Looked like he had Brock Bowers on a touchdown, Genty, Trey Tucker, Jacoby Myers. So it seemed like he really got cooking there, and then he hit Tucker on that deep ball to kind of close out practice. So, I think it's for him in practices since OTAs, he's kind of been trying things out. Like he tries to throw some passes into tight windows and some high difficulty passes. He's kind of as aggressive as the 49ers are in terms of that press man coverage. Like he's not afraid to make those throws and try to fire it in there. And I think even with that mindset, it was kind of impressive that he didn't, mentioning it, the one kind of tip pass interception, but did a pretty good job of protecting the ball today. I thought he was pretty clean. So, you saw a little bit of, a little bit of why they turned the page to him as their starter.
Any chance to bring in like a veteran receiver at some point? Are they happy with this bunch? Because it seems like they could use another wideout.
Yeah, and it doesn't seem like they plan on doing that. I feel like if they were going to, you do it at this point.
Right.
Give guys some runway to come up on the scene. I think they feel solid about the top three. I think the big question is like the depth past that because, Jack Besh, who they drafted in the second round, like it's really just sort of a log jam at slot. Like Jacoby Myers does everything better than him, so like there's not really any spots for him to slide in there as long as Myers is healthy. He doesn't really have the speed, to thrive on the outside. Like they use him on the outside occasionally, but
Right.
I don't think we really saw him too much today with the starters. You going against the 49ers, and then past that is basically special teams practice squad guys at this point. You have the Alex Bachmans of the world, and so I think it could make sense to pick up another veteran receiver, but based on how they behave, and like it just doesn't seem like they really plan to.
You think Bash is more of a long-term guy? Will like he eventually replace Jacoby next year? That's kind of the plan.
I think that's got to be the vision. Even when you draft them, just because their skill sets are so similar. Like he's a guy that primarily, most of the success in college came operating out of the slot. And when you have Myers and Brock Bowers, who also plays a lot in the slot, it's just kind of like, I mean, where did you think he was going to play? You know what I mean? So with Myers being on that expiring deal, we've seen the receiver market, take another leap this offseason. Even, wide receiver two type guys like Cortland Sutton got like $23 million a year from the Broncos. Like that's probably going to be, if he has another good season, that's probably the price tag for a guy like Myers. Seems a little rich for the Raiders for where they're at. So maybe next year is when they turn the best.
Yeah, they seem to be there's definitely some position groups where they want to develop these young guys rather than bringing a vet that's going to take up all the reps and not give those young guys experience. And receivers definitely one of them. I think they want Besh to be able to play on the outside, but it just doesn't seem like he's able to because he just doesn't have that long speed like Reed mentioned. But I mean, I see all these practice reports like he's doing really well in practice, but he didn't really do much against Seattle. But it's
Yeah,
only week
I'll
one.
say some of those practice reports, you gotta take it with a grain of salt.
Are you saying
That's
some
a
are
bit.
bogus? No way.
Yeah, like Besh just hasn't been doing much in practice really since OTAs. I think, he's kind of struggling with, figuring out his place in the offense and not getting those consistent reps probably doesn't help him either when it comes to feeling that out. But again, like, every draft pick doesn't have to play right away. I think it's more of a long term thing for him. Like, you would hope that he'd be able to produce a little bit more as a rookie, but at least early on, just doesn't seem like that's going to be the case to start the season.
All right, let's talk about the Raiders' defense against the Niners' offense. Not a great day for the defense. It seemed every time I looked over on the Niners' side, they were able to hit a big play. Ricky Pearsall had a really nice day against the Raiders' defensive backs. What do you guys see?
Yeah, we've talked about the concerns on this defense for a minute now. I think it's really at all three levels. Today, the where it showed up the most was in the secondary. I think Brock Purdy was able to have his way with him, and that's without Brandon Ayuk and Juwan Jennings, his top two receivers out there, which makes it even more concerning. But mostly the cornerbacks. I think, is kind of the root of the issue. We talked about it. They traded Ja'Cory and Bennett away, really for size reasons, and kind of went all in on this group that has a bunch of traits. Like, guys are tall, long, and fast, but it's a raw group. I know Eric Stokes has been in the league for a few years, but he still hasn't put it all together. You have a rookie in Darian Porter who, had more special team snaps in college than he had cornerback snaps. And then you have DeCameron Richardson, who really struggled as a rookie last year and is trying to bounce back this year. And it's just it's just a group that hasn't proven much. And, the 49ers, even with this kind of hodge group of receivers, they were able to take advantage. And I think the Raiders also struggled with containing CMC coming out of the backfield, George Kittle, and then, also
Kyle
Kyle
Juszczyk got a big
Juszczyk
play.
towards the end of practice. Yeah, I think that was actually Isaiah pull him out in coverage on that play, but he got left pretty much wide open and would have been like a 40-yard touchdown. Anytime you give up 40-yard touchdowns to fullbacks, you're doing something pretty bad out there. So it was a rough day for the secondary. I also think the pass rush wasn't really helping them that much either. Like, it's not a live practice or, pass rush, quote unquote. But I think Maxx Crosby was really rolling early on. And then as practice went on, he started to send more double teams his way and chipping them a little bit more. And the rest of the defensive line just really couldn't create much disruption up there. We saw Tyree Wilson a little bit. I think he had a sack towards the end of practice that would have counted if it was a real game. But I think both up front in the trenches and on the back end, it was a pretty rough day for the Raiders defense.
Yeah, I think the Niners offense is tough to go against in like these kind of joint practices because they're such a quick timing offense and guys like they got McKittle, Kittle and Purdy have it down and even got Purcell knows what he's doing now. He's been a year under his belt, so it's kind of they know where they want to get to and the throw's always on time. So I think that'd be a tough offense to go against these kind of joint practices. I know Purdy mentioned that both Kittle and McCaffrey were really fired up because when you go against another team kind of juices to get flowing. And you can see today McCaffrey, he's kind of back to what he was. He's hard, to stay in front of. I think he was kind of fired up for today. So I thought the Niners had got the better of them, their offense clearly. But I think Max, obviously got some stuff done early on, but like you mentioned, they kind of gave him some more attention. And there was a funny comment from George Kittle about Max, how because at some points they had Max in the 4 technique, and and they moved him inside sometimes. And Kittle pretty much said, "Thank you, Pastor Graham, because when you do that, you make our jobs really easy." So I thought it was kind of funny. But and he said, "Let Max be Max." That's what Kittle was saying. So kind of keep him on the outside and keep him flailing away. But yeah, I thought it was a good day for the Niners offense.
Yeah, like you mentioned, Kyle Shanahan is one of the best play callers in the league, and sometimes he just knows how to get guys wide open. And there was times where Pearsall or Kittle did beat a defensive back, and there was times where it's just like play design, and this guy is just wide open, kind of like that Kyle Juszczyk play they had. I thought the Raiders played a little bit better towards the end of practice. In the 11 drill, they forced a couple field goals instead of letting the Niners get into the end zone. Like you mentioned, there was a really nice Tyree Wilson sack when Maxx Crosby when he was lined up at defensive tackle and they kind of went on the stunt and both of them got to Brock Purdy. So I think in the passing situations, that's when the defensive line can create some pressure, but it's just hard to do if you're not stopping teams on early downs and getting into a situation where you could put Tyree and Crosby and Kuntz on the field at the same time.
Yeah, and like we didn't really get to see it today because these practices are always kind of pass happy, but I think the run defense could be just as bad as kind of the concerns about the pass defense. We saw it, it's preseason game against the Seahawks, so like the starters barely played, but this defensive tackle group without Christian Wilkins, you don't really have that run stuffer type of build anymore, and they let John Jenkins walk in free agency, and so like Adam Butler's a good player. We've talked about him. He's been a really good pass rusher for them the last couple of years, but run defense isn't really his strong suit, and so they're trying to find that answer at the other spot. They traded for Thomas Booker. He's still sort of trying to find his way, but beyond that, it's kind of just this collection of guys, Jonah Lulu, Tonka Hemingway, JJ Pagoose, Tank Booker, like, all these different guys that they're trying in there to see if they can find the answer. And I'm not sure if there is one that they're going to find this season. Like, obviously, they hope to get Wilkins back at some point, and that situation deteriorated pretty badly. And then that linebacker, well, I think you had guys that flashed. Still sort of like a collection of names more so than it is a talented group at this point. Landon Roberts, what you're getting out of him as middle linebacker, but those outside linebacker spots. Kind of, I mean, got Jamal Adams, Devin White, Jermaine Pratt, all trying to compete for roles there. And I think you have that linebacker room where you can kind of feel solid about their ability to stop the run, but in pass coverage, it's a little bit shaky. And so, and then they don't really have an answer at nickelback. And so I think Patrick Graham's gonna have to be really creative this year. We're trying to find answers with this defense. It's probably gonna have to be one of those like 2023 season efforts for him where he's kind of working with a hodgepodge of guys and figuring shit out because they just don't really have the talent or the depth on that side of the ball this year.
Do you guys think they're going to regret trading Jacorian Bennett? I think I thought he was pretty good. I know he doesn't fit Pete Carroll's mold for a cornerback, but to me, it seemed like a pretty, I don't know, hasty trade for my opinion.
Yeah, if Jacorian Bennett ends up starting for the Eagles and he's running back an interception in the playoffs, then I think they'll definitely feel some regret at that moment.
But not until then. All right.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it was definitely a little weird because he was practicing well too. Like
That's what I heard. Yeah.
like just because he's 5'10" or whatever, I get it. But like he was, to me anyway, like he was the most productive cornerback in practice in terms of making plays on the ball. And last year, like again, he only played 10 games because he had the torn labrum. But you look at some of his numbers, like he was legitimately one of the best cornerbacks in the league when he was out there last season. And he's a young guy that's still trending upwards. So definitely was strange to me. I think they could end up regretting it because they don't have a ton of depth at cornerback either. And so, like, even let's say one of these guys does end up panning out, Darian Porter ends up being a stud rookie, like, knock on wood, obviously, but, they don't really have much room for injury. Like, if somebody goes down, like, they're pretty much fucked at cornerback. So, like, I don't know. Like, if you have a guy that's been a good starting cornerback at some point in his career, I feel like you keep him around, even if he's not exactly, doesn't check all your measurable boxes in terms of height, weight, speed, all that stuff.
Yeah, and they're starting to mix up the starting rotation a little bit. And I understand Q Blue Kelly, is that how you say his name? He's working with the first
That's
team a little bit more. Darren Porter's working with the second team a little bit more.
Yeah, he's gotten into the mix like the past week or so. Like he was on the roster last year, practice squad, but he never played. And he's only been in the league for 3 years, but I believe this is his fourth different team already. Got drafted by the Ravens, got cut, got picked up by the Seahawks when Pete Carroll was there. So that's when they crossed paths for the first time in 2023. He got cut from there, got cut from the Packers, cut from the Commanders. So he's bounced around against some 5 teams already in his short career. And, he kind of talked the other day about it. Like he had to get his confidence back. He felt like it was more of a mental thing than a physical thing. He also is like a little bit of a smaller cornerback. Like he's not any bigger than Jacorian Bennett is, which is kind of interesting. But he's been working in there. He made a nice pick the other day off of your man's Aiden O'Connell in practice, and that's probably his best play so
Nice.
far. Yeah, it should go, man. It's just Kirk Cousins. It would have been a pick six if it was a
I
game.
just, I
So
just
he made
defend
his
him from
play.
you guys disparaging him. He doesn't mean
It's not
he's
disparaging,
a
telling the
guy.
truth. But no, yeah, he's been working in there at outside cornerback. So we'll see. I don't. None of those guys have been particularly impressive. So it's definitely an opportunity there, and we'll see how it kind of continues as the preseason goes on.
Yeah. He probably is there for some tackling too. I think they want better tackling from that position. So we'll see if he makes the most out of his opportunity. But what are expectations for the preseason game? Who's playing? What's the rotations going to look like?
Yes, I think for the Raiders it'd be pretty similar to last week. Pete Carroll said everybody's live when we asked him about it today, and last week they played the starter, or they kept some starters on the field like we talked about. JPJ and Jordan Meredith played through the third quarter, I think it was, but like Geno Smith only played a series. I'd be surprised if the guys play more than like 2 series. He said they're going to play a little bit more. A little bit more is probably just another series. So I think it'll still be pretty light on the starters out there, but we'll see guys that are in the mix for like some key position battles, like the cornerback battle, which we've talked about, defensive tackle, some of the offensive line battles. I think we'll see some of those guys continue to play some extended snaps as they try to decide on who they're going to roll with at those spots. And so, yeah, so they'll sprinkle the starters in there, home opener, get the fans a little something to be excited about.
I think Brock Purdy, he wants to play. I think he will play probably for a quarter or so. Some of the starters, I think. No reason to play McCaffrey, Trent Williams, guys like that. But I think most other guys will probably play for a while and get their feet wet. I mean, the Niners have had 2 of these joint practices now with the Broncos today, so they've gotten a lot of their work in. They want to get in, but they still want to face some live bullets. So I think we'll see be a good first quarter. I think we'll have both mostly starters for both teams first quarter or so.
Ricky Pearsall should be playing, I assume
I
then.
think so. I think he's a guy who they brought along slowly because he had that injury, but he's looked good in practice. I think they'll give him some run. I think that like they're pretty confident that they can stay healthy.
That's good. I mean, you won't see all the Niners starters, but there should be some good reps for the Raiders there. All right, let's get into some fan questions. One fan question for Vic, and we can let you go after this question. Ask the old friend how much he misses his old team. Ask him to embellish if he must, by John Mann.
I'll say this. I was telling you guys before we went on air. I do miss the Raiders fans. I do miss the spice and the kind of the attitude and the kind of the energy from Raider fans. I mean, I'm still getting to know Irish fans. I'm sure I'll be fine at some point, but it's been a little tentative so far. But I do miss the all the opinions and kind of the active fan voice. I'll say I have a lot of people I know here for a long time, so I miss people in the building as well. But it was nice today. I enjoyed today. I liked how the fans are kind of really excited about practice. It was a very cool atmosphere today, so I'm glad I was able to come back today, and it was good.
Yeah, Vic misses that toxic energy. He needs some drama in
Yeah,
his life.
I don't know about drama, but I like the sauce. I like a little sauciness.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us, Vic. We'll let you go, and yeah, we'll talk to you soon.
All right, boys. See you on Saturday.
All right,
See you
man.
Sat.
Appreciate you.
Sweet.
All right, let's finish the rest of these fan questions without Vic. Next question is the JPJ situation as big of a deal as fans are making out to be? What percentage chance would you give him going into week 1 as established starting right guard by Tristan?
Yeah, I mean, like he's gonna be 100% that he's gonna be a starter. Like in terms of guard center, I think it's still like a little bit up in the air, based on how things go the last couple weeks of the preseason. Like if Meredith is just not good at center, like I think they're still open to potentially flipping JPJ back to center at some point. But the plan for right now, by all intents and purposes, is to roll with the 5 that they have. And JPJ, like we get it, like his preference is to play center, but it's not this like big thing internally. Like he's going to do what the coaching staff tells him to do. We've seen him play guard before. He played guard for several starts, left guard and right guard last year for several starts, and so I think he had a solid rookie season doing that, and definitely has a lot to clean up at guard. I think in order to improve in that area, he's a little bit wild as a rookie, and so they want to see him fine tune that, and improve his technique and his fundamentals to kind of untap that next level. But in terms of him being a starter, like he's going to be a starter. Like they're not trying to trade JPJ, so like fans worrying about it from that standpoint, I think are going a little bit too far off the edge. But I guess kind of a interesting follow up question for you, Ted, is like, what do you think? Because I know you were kind of adamant that I think you thought Parham should play center, but nonetheless, I thought you were pretty adamant that JPJ should move over to guards. Like, what do you think he needs to work on at that spot in order to take the next step this season?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a different position and getting used to double teams from that position, working on his technique. And it's the same thing for how the things that he needs to work on as a center. He just needs to get himself under control a little bit. I mean, I know his mentality is to try to take somebody's head off on every play, and we see that, but it's just being more consistent and just being more under control. And at guard, he doesn't have to do as much thinking. He doesn't have to make the line calls. You still have to make line calls as a guard, but you're not having to read the entire front and changing the protection and all those things. So I think it's actually good for him to actually not have to worry about that and just worry about his technique and worry about getting better at it and being more consistent. All right. Next question. Besides experience and reps, what else does Darian Porter need the most to be a starter besides the measurables? The few clips I've seen are insane athleticism wise from Brown Man 86.
Yeah, I think a little bit of everything when your guy is as raw as he is at that spot. But with his lack of size, I think for Pete Carroll in particular, like the two things he's going to want to see is his press technique get a lot better. And then you don't think about it as often with cornerbacks, but tackling. Like he just can't be this guy that's just a sieve in the run game, and every time a team runs to his side of the ball is a positive gain. He's pretty thin, like he's tall, 6'3", but he's a pretty thin guy. Then he's got to bulk up and fill out his physique. So I think kind of that physical side of playing corner, both getting physical at the line of scrimmage with receivers and also being able to be at least solid and run support are going to be pretty key to him being a guy that's a full-time starter with the Raiders.
Yeah, I agree. To me, the number one thing is tackling, and this is an issue that showed up on his college film too, and we saw a little bit of that against Seattle. Like the Raiders want to get him experience. Obviously, they thrusted him to playing with the ones very early, so they want to get him experience. They believe in him, but at the same time, you can't be a liability as a tackler and get that experience. So if he could at least show that he could be a willing tackler, he doesn't have to be a big hitter, but come up, make your reads, come up on a run, make your run fit, and you know, grab the guy's leg for you. You don't have to be a huge hitter, but you have to be passable in that situation. So it's important for him to be on the field, but he can't be on the field unless he improves on tackling, which is an issue right now. And um, like you said, a bit of it is size. He does need to gain size, um, but how far can you go as improving a tackler from now to when the season starts? We don't know, and that's part of one of the reasons why he is getting cycled out of the starting group a little bit. And that's not to say that he will be second team, but they're starting to give other guys looks.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to be locked in as a starter by week one. Like it seems like Eric Stokes pretty much has one of those starting spots locked down, just based on what we've seen so far. But I wouldn't be surprised if it's a little bit of a rotation there at the other spot with Porter and guys like DCAM, and we'll see maybe Kelly if he sticks around.
All right. Next question is Zamir White the favorite for RB2 by Jorge Alanis.
I think it's been trending that way in practice as of late. He's a guy that, had high expectations last season. I think he came on really strong in 2023, and there was a lot of buzz around him last season. He felt pretty flat. I think part of that was the offensive line was pretty terrible, but also like he just wasn't good. Like his vision was poor. He wasn't hitting holes properly, and he was too heavy last year. And so he set out to lose some weight this offseason to help him get a little bit faster and more explosive, and also help out with his stamina and endurance. And seems like that's benefited him so far in camp. I know he didn't do much in preseason game against the Seahawks, but in practice, coaches have been pleased with the progress that he's made. And I think it was kind of assumed that Raheem Mostert would have that role. Given he's a more proven veteran and he has a familiarity with Chip Kelly as somebody that's played for him in the past. But I think Zamir White's right in there, and to see him start today, I think he'd probably be the number two back right now.
I think Sincere McCormick could possibly challenge when he gets healthier, but we'll see. I mean, it doesn't seem like a natural fit in his offense, but if he did lose weight and he is faster, then I can see him doing it. But I do think his skill sets really work well as a kick returner, especially with the new kickoff rules where you are going to see a bunch of returns. I wouldn't be surprised if he did pretty well as a kick returner.
Yeah, we saw him out there in the preseason game, and he's been part of the group, working in practice as well at that spot. And, especially if he can add some special teams value, that only, further ensures, a roster spot for him. He was a guy that I think the team, was potentially open to moving earlier this offseason, but, he really put his head down and put the work in and put himself, back in position to pretty much have a roster spot at this point. It's just a matter of where he falls into the rotation.
All right, next question. What position battles do you find the most interesting or your favorite by Mez?
I think right now I would say defensive tackle is probably the most interesting to me. Just 'cause there's so many guys that are like rotating there. There's legitimately 4 or 5 guys that could potentially end up being a starter next to Adam Butler. And I don't really know which one is going to be. Like, I think it's pretty much wide open at this point. Like, you could probably say Thomas Booker and Jonah Lulu have the best chances, but neither one of those guys did a ton against the Seahawks. And I think you're going to have to see more from either one of them in order to lock up that job. If there's anybody that does end up locking it up, it could just be something that's a rotation, throughout the season. But I think that's probably the most consequential battle that sort of remains. That's pretty murky because if they can't get that defensive tackle spot solidified next to Adam Butler, I think the run defense is gonna be pretty bad this year. So I think that one's the one that's kind of looming the brightest right now.
Yeah, and I think Tonka Hemingway is going to make some noise there, or put his hat in the ring to be a starter because I thought he had a really good game against Seattle and made some nice plays. We'll see how he plays against the Niners. I think he is getting more reps with the first team. Is that correct?
Tonga Hemingway.
Yeah, or is he
Uh,
rotating in there a little bit more?
he's kind of rotated in more. Like I wouldn't say he's like when it comes to like traditional like base down first team reps, it's typically either Booker or Lulu at this point. And then I guess the Seahawks, we saw Pagoose get some early snaps there as well. And then Hemingway is kind of rotated in as the game has gone on. He's actually played some defensive end for them as well when they kind of go with those, they kind of mix in 5-man front sometimes. And I think on a depth chart, actually have him listed as defensive end now. But I think he's going to, given his body type, that doesn't surprise you. He kind of has that tweener body type. So I think they view him as kind of a move guy who can play inside, outside, depending on the situation. But I'd be a little surprised if like you're talking starter, just given that he is on the lighter end and like given Butler, like run defense isn't really his strong suit. I think having two of those types of guys as your interior defensive lineman on early downs probably is not the best idea, but maybe on third downs, kind of more obvious pass situations, you can see him rotating in there.
Yeah. I mean, I think there are some young players that flash for sure. So there could be some guys that break through, and it could be a very, very terrible position for the Raiders. We won't know, but I think at least there's some flashes, so it's not all doom and gloom. All right, next question: does Laki Tasi have a shot at making the 53-man roster? Looks like he is the next Jordan Malata, big name. It could be risky to put him on the practice squad by Kowalski.
Yeah, we saw him play. He's been playing some more guard as of late. That's where he played in the preseason games, the Seahawks, and he had a couple nice plays. I know you tweeted out some of the all 22 earlier this week of him making some nice blocks. And coaching staff and players alike have been pretty complimenting of him. I don't see him making the 53-man roster. They do have a rule where the international pathway players, you can kind of have a designated practice squad spot for them where it doesn't, you don't take up a roster spot or anything like that. You can keep around the building. I think that's ultimately where he's going to land for them. And they continue to work and try to develop him. That comparison is very lofty, but he did mention that as one of his inspirations. That's probably why the fan mentioned that. But he's made a lot of progress. I mean, they brought him here initially to play defense. He was going to play defensive tackle, and then Pete Carroll decided to switch him to the offensive side of the ball. So he said he pretty much had his mind made up playing defense, and he said it was a lot more simple on that side of the ball. But then they flipped him to offense, and his head has been swimming a little bit trying to learn the offense. And he's a guy that literally has never played football before this year. Like he was a rugby player growing up in Australia. So this is all really new to him, and I don't see him realistically being a guy that's able to play this year. So I think that practice squad slot is probably the rightful home for him, and then we'll see how he develops in the future. I do think he could have some legitimate upside. Anytime you have a guy that's his size, I mean, he's like 6'7" or something like that, and 330 pounds or whatever he is. Like, and he's a fluid mover. He's pretty athletic. So if he can get the mental side of it down, I think he's definitely a guy worth developing for sure.
Yeah, I wouldn't think he's in big danger of being taken off the practice squad, but because you have to realize how far he has to go to actually be a legitimate player. But it is very encouraging of how he made some of those highlight plays with just playing 2 months of football and then having to transition from defense to offense. And I know in his press conference he said he thinks his football knowledge is like a 7 out of 10 now, but it's probably not. He's underestimating how big the scale actually is. It's probably a scale of 15 or 20, or maybe even bigger than that he has to get over. I mean, like, you know, you got protection calls, you got different fronts, you got, a ton of different run plays and calls within the run plays and different techniques within, if you see a certain type of defense against certain types of defenders, there's such a vast amount of knowledge he needs to absorb. And he's not going to get there this year. It might take 2 years, but I mean, maybe next year he's a guy that will challenge for the 53-man roster. If he makes some huge jump, maybe a guy that, 'cause, I mean, he's 6'7", 330 pounds. So if he makes some huge jump, maybe a guy that will challenge for the 53-man roster. If he makes some huge jump, maybe a guy that will challenge for the 53-man roster. If he makes some huge jump, maybe a guy that challenges for a starting position, but I think that's very highly unlikely. But he has a far way to go. So with teams just trying to do their best to put together a playable 53-man roster, I don't think he's in danger of um, being taken from the Raiders if he's on a practice squad. So I think he'll be fine there. All right, last question. What will the offense and defense hang their hat on this year? Where will they struggle? By Jack Caruso.
Let's start with the offense. I think, um, what they should be able to, hang their hat on in terms of like, I guess, an identity is, I think we'll see kind of the personnel grouping be pretty consistent this year. Kind of lean towards the heavier personnel groupings. So with the receiver, you know, kind of lack of depth there. I think they feel fine about the top 2 or 3 guys at receiver, but I think it just makes more sense for them to operate out of more 12, 13 personnel this year. And when you draft a running back like Ashton Genty, you plan on being a very run-oriented offense, even with getting Smith at quarterback. And so I think kind of having that approach of, heavier personnel sets, really trying to establish the run, I think that's going to be kind of the identity of the offense. On the same token, I think what could be their their weakness is the offensive line. I think that kind of stands out as the question mark. Like, is this group going to be good enough for them to have the type of identity that they want to? I think the tricky part is like this year they don't really have the receiving talent to like throw the ball 40 times a game. Like I don't really think that's going to be like a great path to success for them, given what their setup is there. So I think their identity is going to be consistent. It's kind of how effective it is going to depend on offensive line. I think on the defensive side of the ball, we kind of talked about it earlier. I think kind of the one area where you could see some upside is their pass rush. Kind of in those more obvious passing situations. We all know how good Maxx Crosby is, but Malcolm McCollum's being back healthy. Tyree Wilson, flashing a little bit on the inside, and Adam Butler as well. And I think Patrick Graham's going to have to get more aggressive this year in terms of blitzing to kind of supplement some of the issues that they're going to have in pass coverage, and just try to speed up opposing quarterbacks a little bit. So it'll be pretty aggressive from that standpoint, trying to get after opposing quarterbacks. Um, and then I think in terms of what could hold them back, I think that spine of the defense that we've kind of talked about, like defensive tackles, linebackers, up through the safeties, like the run defense, I think is something that kind of jumps out at you as a potential major issue. So I think that would probably be like my areas that I would highlight.
Yeah, I agree. I think offensively, and it kind of sucks hearing this, especially when you draft a back 6 overall. But I just don't think they're going to be like a top 10 blocking unit. The goal is to be at least average because they were 32nd in run success rate last year. If you could at least be average and be a threat in a running game and have Genty hit those big plays once in a while, then that makes your 12 personnel credible. You create mismatches that way. But I think the identity of the offense is to be a balanced offense that can be a threat running the ball. Geno kind of spreading the ball around to Brock Bowers, Jacoby Myers, in the short to intermediate game and hitting the occasional big play to Trey Tucker or Thornton. I think a lot of the offense is going to ride on Geno. I just don't think that this line is good enough to kind of just hang your hat on the run. So it's going to be up to them to be able to protect them at least, not give, you're not going to depend on this line to give them 3.4 seconds in the pocket every play, but at least be passable. Don't be a disaster like it was in Seattle. And I think Geno could thrive in that type of offense. And defensively, I agree. I think you have to be very aggressive, especially on early downs when you want to create some chaos against a run and try to get teams into passing situations because that's probably where your strength is when you could get Crosby and Kuntz to pin their ear back. And I think Tyree will take a step up as a interior rusher this year. All right. That is all we have for you guys today. Make sure you guys subscribe, turn on your notification, hit the like button on YouTube, subscribe, and leave reviews on Spotify and Apple. When we go live, join the super chat, get priority for questions on live streams and memberships. Members get badges and custom emojis. And make sure you guys listen, subscribe, and hit the like button on Spotify and Apple as well. Thank you so much for joining us. We will talk to you guys after the game.
All right, y'all. Peace.